everyone, and welcome back to Bullish on Business, where we really have been diving in talking to authors lately, which has been a big plus for most of our audience. So today's guest is someone who's dedicated her life to words, wisdom, and the art of storytelling, Maryann Lesert. Hi, Maryann.
Hi there.
How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me,
Oh,
Rose.
you're welcome. I'm so excited that you're here. She is a novelist, a playwright, and recently retired English professor who has spent decades inspiring students to find their authentic voices at Grand Rapids Community College. After closing that incredible chapter of her life, she is beginning a brand new one, having just moved to the beautiful lakeshore town of Manistee, Michigan. It's the perfect setting for reflection, creativity, and the next wave of stories she's ready to tell. Maryann's writing has always explored the spaces where humanity meets nature, where ambition, community, and the environment collide. As she as she settles into her new chapter, she brings with her the insights, lessons, and spirit of a lifetime spent cultivating both minds and meaning. In today's episode, which I'm so excited about, we'll dive into her journey as a teacher and author, what retirement means to her creativity journey, and how she's embracing life on the edge of Lake Michigan, such a pretty spot, with fresh eyes and an open heart. So pull up a chair, grab a cup of coffee, and join me for a rich conversation with the remarkable Maryann Lesert about transformation, storytelling, and what it really means to live a life shaped by words. Well, that is from my heart. It's so good to have you here with me today, Maryann.
Oh, and thanks for that introduction.
Well,
I hope I can say something that in some way lives up to that.
well, if you don't, you definitely do it in words. But I have a feeling after spending the day with you at the Cadillac Book Fest,
Oh, that was fun.
it was, and I know you have the gift of gab as well as the gift of writing. So let's jump right in.
All right.
Before we get started too much, would you tell us a little bit about you yourself? Like, where were you born? What's your family like? I know you have a wonderful husband and you have children,
Yeah,
grown
yeah,
children.
yeah. Um, well, probably the most, I guess, the thing that connects me to my writing most is I grew up very involved in the natural world. My dad, it was funny, always said every road trip that we took, every trip that we took, anything there was to pull off and go investigate, his saying was, it's educational. And he had another thing that we did. We were camping as a family a lot, and we jokingly, when we grew up, called them the Vigor and Vim swims. He
Oh,
would literally, no matter where we were, if there was a body of water, you had to get up in the morning and jump in.
oh, wow.
That's how you started the day.
Cool dad.
Yeah, yeah,
Really cool.
yeah. So that's a big reason for why my husband and I now landed in Manistee, just loving that area, the lake shore, the Manistee River, the state forest, the national forest. So I grew up, I was born a little bit south of Grand Rapids, have lived in Grand Rapids. My two adult children still live in the Grand Rapids area. One, our son Max, is a musician. His younger sister, Aurora, is a dancer,
Wow.
and a mental health worker. And my husband is a librarian, spent his career as a teen librarian. So there's always been a lot of, literature, art, music in our household.
Oh, that sounds
Yeah.
fantastic. So, looking back after years of teaching and writing, what stands out to you as the most rewarding part of your career?
The thing that I think is that has been the most important to me and rewarding, and I think to me and even my students as writers is, and this might sound a little odd, but constant change.
Hmm.
As a writer and even as a professor of writing, everything that you pick up and start is brand new. I mean, like in a creative writing class, there's nothing that you pick up and know what you're going to get.
Mm,
You just immerse yourself in something new constantly. Um, and as a novelist and as a playwright, I always felt really inspired by that, that I got a chance to immerse myself in a whole new world every time that I started kind of seeing the world or hearing the world and thinking about it in a new character's perspective.
I see that. I think that's you've got a creative spark inside of you
Yeah.
that really thrives on creativity.
Yeah. And it would, I've worked in other fields, I've done other jobs, I've enjoyed them, but boy, that act of writing where you can completely immerse yourself in a whole new areas of research and
Hmm.
constantly learn. I,
Hmm.
I love that part.
That's very cool. So, shaping writers, can you share a moment that you had with a student that reminded you of why you love teaching, like a special student or a special story?
Yeah. There have been several really special individual students that I've had in classes and then maintained relationships with for a decade or two. Those are
Mm,
always really special. Um, but one of the things that I can think of that happens in the classroom that really makes me smile is especially whether it's writing research, like a research oriented class where they're writing with research, or especially in creative writing workshops, when students start to become really excited by and get involved in the work of others.
mm,
Like we're sitting in a small workshop group and
mm.
I start hearing them pick up the language of like mentoring and developing work that I speak with them, and they start speaking to each other about
Oh,
it. And they start to get really excited about, ooh, like I see what you're doing with this character, and it starts to make me think of, and I wonder if you've thought about, and they start
ooh,
really carefully kind of pushing and nurturing each
I love
other.
that.
And there are like I always kind of tried to put images with my writing phrases.
Mm,
So I'm trying to think of one. Windows of opportunity. Like, let's say I was reading somebody's work and I could tell they had mentioned something, but then just passed on it way too quickly
mm,
when there was something there to develop.
mm.
So instead of saying, you didn't develop this, I'd say, ooh, I'm looking at a window of opportunity
Oh, it's
here.
such a positive way to
Yeah,
say it.
yeah. And so students would start saying, Rose, I really like this, but when you mention this, there's a window of opportunity. And I'm sitting there going
Hey,
quietly,
yes,
It's like
that.
that what it always told me is they believe what I've been telling them, because I always tell my students that you will learn more from listening to what you say about somebody else's work than you will about reading your own work day after day after day.
Wow, that's so insightful. Can you expand on that?
Um, it's it's a matter of I guess what I've learned, in undergraduate schools and writing workshops and my own graduate school education is whenever I was aware enough to listen to myself, to think about, like, let's say I was saying to you, Rose,
Hmm.
writer friend of mine,
Hmm.
boy, you've got great descriptions, but you tend to pile a bunch of them on. What if
Mm,
you cut back those three sentences to one
mm,
key image that I could hold on to for a moment or something like that? Usually I need to listen to that advice
sure.
just as much or maybe even more than the person whose work
Oh,
I'm digging
okay, I
into.
get it.
So that idea that we sometimes pick out the things in other people's work that we really need to address in
Yeah,
our own.
I think that's a really cool. You're gonna make me cry. That's
Yeah,
so good.
yeah.
That's
Well,
so
something
good.
I mean,
That's so good.
yeah, something I try to keep in mind.
Oh, I love it. I love that. So, balancing two worlds, how did you
Mhm.
ever juggle, being a professor with, how many students did you have at a time?
Basically, every semester I had about 100
I
writing
love so.
students.
That is a lot of
Yeah,
people to
it's a
take care
lot.
of. That's a lot of students. And then, so you have that huge, I don't know, call it caseload or
Yeah, yeah, student loan.
student load as a professor, and then you were a novelist, which some people, have to go off to the mountaintop and sit and just focus on their novel for years at a time. And you were able to really balance those two worlds. How did those roles ever collide in surprising ways?
Um, well, first of all, managing and trying to balance, I mentioned the idea of immersion, and I am kind of an immersive person. But one of the things that I always did to balance things is during my breaks, during the summer, I did not teach because that's when I researched,
Mm,
you know, went on, immersed myself in place and wrote, did the really generative kind of new creative part of writing. Because I always found once I got a good start on something, I could then, keep revising in little snippets and little spaces between
mhm,
teaching. Um, but the collision is interesting. And a lot of that happened when I realized that I used to kind of keep my writing life separate from my students, if that makes sense. Like obviously I was telling them things about writing and sharing things. But I remember when my first novel came out, I had this incredible creative writing group. It was an evening group, and the age and the life experience and the lived experience was incredibly diverse. And when they found out I was writing a novel, they just kept at me. They're like, "What is it about? What's
mm,
going on? What's the publication process like?" So during that 4 month time was when I was doing the ARC, the advanced review copy. So I brought it in and let them hold it and read it. I had to make decisions about the cover.
mm,
And the first cover turned out beautiful, my
mhm.
first novel, Base 10. But there was a time when I wasn't sure about it. And I even put it up on the screen and I said, tell me what you think, And I'll never forget how fun that was to be, um, not to be an expert, but to be asking them,
Mm, Kind
Um,
of a collaboration.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And those are some of the students that I've probably kept in touch with the longest. That was 2009 when my novel came out,
Wow.
um, 2008-ish when we were all, but they opened right up and got really excited about it.
Well, that's really cool. It
Yeah.
sounds like you built community
Yeah,
and
thanks.
it
That's
really
a nice
brings a
way to look at
bonding.
it.
That's
Yeah.
really neat.
Yeah, I wanted them to know that we're all writers. We all start somewhere. So it's
Mhm.
not like you start as an expert
Well,
always.
let's spend a minute and go off script for a
Okay.
second about your books. I don't want to wait any longer, and I'm sure you guys don't want me to wait any longer. Will you tell us about your books?
Yeah, so sometimes my writing is called eco fiction or place-based fiction, and I appreciate both of those labels. I would say the thing about both of my books, Base 10, which came out in 2009, and Landmarks, which just came out in 2024, is that they are the natural world is just as much of a character as the people,
Oh,
and that they have equal time on the page. They're equally important to me. There's a phrase that indigenous authors sometimes use, and they call it the more than human world. And I think
mm,
that's the world that I live in.
mm.
Um, so
That's so deep.
yeah, yeah,
Wow.
that idea that
The more
it's,
than human world. I love that because, one of the things that, and I'm just going to take a little minute
oh,
and
you
say how much
go for it.
one of the things that really peeves me, one of my worst pet peeves, is when you hear someone talk about an animal versus mankind and like how much superior man is to the animals. Because I love animals.
Right.
And it just makes me furious.
Yeah.
And so I feel a sense of reverence for nature
Mm-hmm.
as I have for animals.
Mm-hmm.
And I really love that.
Oh,
And you
thanks.
call it more than human?
Yeah, the more than human world. The idea that,
Absolutely.
I mean, a lot of our stories are all about our human dramas or traumas or
Mhm.
experiences, but it's as if the natural world or even our environment is gone.
Absolutely.
Like it doesn't exist on the
As a
page.
person living through this technological like explosion, and I was actually born in the late 50s, so I remember playing in the dirt. I
Hmm.
remember driving down dirt roads. I remember every night having a campfire, and I just remember really being, getting worms out of the ground and going fishing and in the late 50s was seriously, we thought we were the bomb technologically with all the new fangled appliances and the
Hmm.
great new
Hmm.
roads we had. And my grandmother, she actually was born in I think 1890, and she took a train across the Great Plains to Vancouver because when the lumber mills dried up in Michigan, they went to Vancouver Island to be cooks in the lumber
Hmm.
camps out there, and they ended up. But she saw buffalo,
Oh, wow.
um, huge, huge, huge. You know, on the range with
Hmm.
buffalo. And so, I'm sure she saw a lot more
Right.
and was more in touch with nature. But just in our lifetime, how much removed we are. And
Yeah.
how did you, and I have to say, working for IBM and being such a techie, I have probably backed away from nature. How did you stay engaged in nature through this technological like explosion? How did
Yeah.
you do it?
Yeah. Well, part of what I mean, I literally, there's no better way to say it. I'm literally inspired to write by the natural world.
Mm,
Like even when I start my writing days, I have a cup of coffee and I go outside. And
mm,
right now I'm bundling myself up and still going outside.
mhm.
Um, in fact, in our new home, we're going to have a 3-season screen room with windows so that I can at least get outside,
Oh, very
you know.
cool. I've never heard of a room like that. What is a room like that?
Just basically a screen room with windows, and it's not heated, but it's insulated
Okay.
so that,
So you're not like bitter cold, but
yes,
but
exactly.
it's still brisk.
Yeah, yeah. I
Oh,
mean,
very cool.
yeah,
So you'll still get out there and feel
yeah,
the
yeah,
element.
yeah. And every day of my life, if I can, we were talking about this before we started, I either hike or swim.
Mm.
That's just kind of throwing myself out there in the natural world and in Lake Michigan's cold blue waters,
Brr.
whatever it is, yeah, to stay in touch with that.
So
It
you're
reminds me of something much, much bigger
mhm.
than me
Mhm.
and our human stories, that there's something that's ongoing and forever and has a whole consciousness and sentience of its own beyond
Mhm.
us. So,
Wow.
yeah.
So I'm going to put her books in the show notes. You're going to want to read them, read both of them, especially if you are starved for nature like most of us. We're trapped in this technological, love it and hate it,
Mhm.
love-hate relationship with technology. Here's an opportunity to experience what Maryann experiences through her books. Thank you for taking us into that tangent.
Oh, yeah, you
I
bet.
really loved it. I really, really did.
Thanks for opening that window of opportunity, right?
There you go. I love it. So, legacy in the classroom. What do you hope that your students carry forward?
Um, I guess if I had to, if it to put it in a nutshell, I always tried to instill in my students this saying, and it's very simple, but I wanted to resonate with them all the way through, and it's be the strongest you that you can be. Um, because a lot of us, whether experienced writers or new writers, tend to think we have to appeal to trends, or we have to be like, or we have to compete with or compare to. Um, in the art world, that's very much alive too. And part of it is a desire to share your story. You want to make it relatable to your readers. But I always tried to tell students that we don't need a bunch more of what we already have. we need you
Right.
to be the strongest you that you can be and believe that you have a take on the world or something to say
Mm-hmm.
that's really important and is going to add to the whole instead of either dumb it down or muddy it up,
Mm-hmm.
be something really unique.
Mm-hmm.
So that be the strongest you that you can be. I hope
Mm-hmm.
that that lasts for all of them.
I love that. I love that. It makes me think of, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs
Hmm.
and I try to, and they're young and and some of them are trying to be coaches and they're just doing their very best. This is a little bit more of a commercialized take on what you just said is that people will pay you for your perspective. If someone is
Yeah,
coaching someone and they need some guidance, they will, and people will buy books for someone's perspective and
right.
will want to read what someone else's perspective is. So I think no wonder we became fast friends.
Yeah, yeah.
I love
You
that.
said something else about I want to get there in the end and I don't want to forget. Is
What's that?
something about the moving from Michigan to Vancouver and moving to the Northwest for logging. So I want to go back to that at the end.
Okay, like we certainly can. No
All right.
worries. Well, now we're going to hit on to something I think that we already know is a big part of Marianne's heart, and is this whole environmental theme. And we know from what she stated so far that that's a big part of her work. It really touches on that. Do you feel that your retirement gives you more freedom to really speak and create in that space?
Um, yeah, I mean, there's definitely more freedom to be able to say something without thinking that I'm representing an institution, as far as like environmental advocacy or even, participating in a protest and for to bring awareness to something that I really care about. Um, but I must say that I was extremely lucky working at Grand Rapids Community College, that it was an incredibly supportive place to work. And it was a place that there was a phrase that our deans used to use, that at GRCC we were teacher practitioners, that most of us were working in the areas that we were teaching in.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there's anything wrong with staying in the research and academic world, but we were very much hands-on with
Mm-hmm.
our subject matter. And so, very early on at GRCC, I was organizing these, environmentally focused events, bringing in speakers, um, working toward what we then all called sustainability. So I never really felt hindered by
Mm-hmm.
that, by my institution. I felt appreciated
Right.
for it,
Very good.
for what I brought to it. But of course, then there's the whole aspect of time.
Mm,
When teaching, and I love teaching, but I would be working with the ideas of 100 other people at a time,
mm,
and your mind and your heart get kind of filled up.
mhm.
Um, so now I'm just really looking forward to immersing myself in each storyline or area of research that
Mhm.
I want to move into. Um, and if anything, the pressure has changed in a different way, because now it's like you've got all the time in the world. What are you going to do with it?
You do,
So it's
right.
like I feel a little bit of, I used to always say, oh, if I wasn't working full time, I could probably finish a novel in a year
Right.
instead of 5 years. So my next novel, which I've sketched up, I've got the arc of the idea, but
Mm.
it's simply a sketch, and I need to fully write the first draft. I am challenging myself to finish that complete draft within 1 year. So,
Pressure's on.
yeah, yeah.
And so do you think you'll give yourself more pressure? Are you the type of person that when you put it on yourself, do you really feel more pressure, or do you feel the same, or is it a little bit more relaxed?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think that my son, who's a musician, said to me once, and at first I was kind of like, I don't know about that, because I was kind of, I guess, in some ways whining, creatively about not having the time and how
Mhm.
I really feel inspired by what's happening in the classroom, but then I don't always have time to go touch that idea with my own writing. And he said, "Well, Mom, maybe you're one of those people that needs some kind of, resistance or something to work against, to
Mhm.
to work for.
Right.
Maybe you need some kind of limitation to push you." And at first I really thought, now that's not nice to say, Max, but he was kind of right. And so the pressure now is in reverse. It's like I don't have that automatic limitation to work against.
Hmm.
So the only limitation I have now is maybe myself,
Hmm.
like putting that pressure on.
Right.
So I plan to take a lot of hikes, and maybe even last weekend I was swimming still in the big
Oh,
lake.
wow.
Temperature is about 62, 63, but
Hmm.
I was in there, with
Good for
the
you.
screaming type of
Yeah,
dip.
they call that what, cold
Yeah,
plunging.
yeah, yeah. But I plan to do a lot of that just to take the pressure off. A walk, even throughout the winter. Winter hiking is one of my favorite things to do, in that kind of stillness and peace that
Mhm.
just kind of opens you
I
up.
say go for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to enjoy your first, especially your first year of retirement. You're
Yeah.
really you're probably setting the pace of
Yeah.
the way you're going to go for it. So make sure that you scratch all those itches.
Yeah.
So lessons from literature, which I think you've probably done a lot of um, study with your degrees
Mhm.
and your experience. After decades of reading, teaching, and writing, what's the single biggest truth literature has taught you about life?
Right off the bat, I would say that we are all more like than either we want to recognize or need to recognize. I'm thinking all the different branches of literature that I've read, um, just the universality of being human, and figuring out how to live in our places and live together well. Um, but I also think that within that universality, something that I really learned by specializing in environmental literature
Mhm.
and what would be called literature of resistance, is that there is a difference between kind of like the male canon of literature and the history of female literature.
Mhm.
And and like in British American, literature, we often separate those two.
Mhm.
And and I think that's to our detriment, when we bring in kind of um, male and female perspectives to any problem or to any place. We just enrich it. We
Mhm.
increase that universality instead of constantly pushing for the difference. But, you know,
That's true in Asia as well, because I know that I read some books about how the women, I think it's either Japanese or Chinese, had even women had special writing,
yes,
like
yeah,
special characters or special language, and to keep it segregated so that they could write what they wanted to write,
yeah,
and because it was the only way they could.
yeah.
And so it's so true, though. But diversity together, bringing us all
Mm-hmm,
together,
mm-hmm,
accepting one another
mm-hmm.
is so critical. And it really ties to some of the challenges that I wrote in my book, Lead Like a
Yeah,
Lioness, because some of the major issues still to this day are women being heard and having a voice. So I appreciate that very much.
I just want to break in and say I can't wait to Read Like a Lioness. I mean, we met at
Yes.
a book fair and I saw that title and started talking to you about it, and I can't wait.
Oh, thank you.
The other thing is, if anybody wants to follow up on that women's language, there's an incredible novel written by a Chinese American author, Lisa See, S-E-E. It's called Snowflower and the Secret Fan, and it's all about how women would write literally in a secret language.
Right.
So,
I'll put that in the
yeah.
show notes because that's actually, thank you for remembering the title of that
Yeah,
book because I
probably
had
what you were
forgotten.
thinking of.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
And I think I read that in a book club. I can't even remember. It's
Yeah.
been a while, but it really touched my heart. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful book.
It's a great book.
Really.
It's tragically beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that where they talk about the women and their feet?
The foot
Oh,
binding. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
that was it hurts
Yeah.
my feet to even
I
think about it. And
know.
they said that 10% of the women who got their feet bound in those days actually died.
Yeah.
They
From
would die.
infection.
10% of the girls would die
Yeah.
from infection. I mean,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah. So let's talk a little bit about, let's just take a minute though and think about that. Praise God that we don't live in times like that, but
Yeah.
there are parts of the world that still have a lot of issues that are similar.
Yeah.
So, advice to emerging writers. So, we're going to get back to helping you, those of you out in the audience that actually have a book in you. We all should write a book, whether it's about what we think living a good life is about, or a story that you have inside you that you want your grandchildren to know about you or your experiences. So, advice to those writers. If you could give parting message to the young or old emerging writers, what would it be?
Okay. Well, I'm going to draw on that. Be the strongest you that you can be. Have that frame, that kind of place you're coming from as you write. And then there's a writing mentor of mine. Her name is Sina Jeter Naslin. She writes historical fiction, and one of her most famous books is Ahab's Wife, where she writes about the life of the wife of Captain Ahab, who's only mentioned in like one or two lines in the whole
Wow.
book, but she
Yeah.
gives her whole life a story. But anyway, Sina always said you reach the universal through the particular. Meaning, instead of trying to, again, sound like everybody else, when you are your strongest sense of self, that's when a reader universally connects with that desire and longing to be our strongest selves. So probably very entrepreneurial to think about it
Mhm.
that way too. And then in terms of, raw writing craft, I would say, especially if you're working on something new, if you're working on a long story like a memoir or a novel or even a full play, um, my advice is always get the entire arc of the story out first. You'll have ideas along the way, you'll think of revisions, you can make side notes. But I always think of when you're trying to, arc the story out, get from the beginning, move into all the areas you need to get to, and work toward that end. You're writing with the most kind of inspiration and driving power. And if we start to tinker with ideas as we're working in that way, you might reduce some of that raw, kind of powerful thing that happens when you're just trying to get it out.
Mm,
So be the strongest you can be.
right?
Write the universal through the particular. And when you actually sit down to write, just push through. Get all the way through the arc of it before you start
So
tinkering.
you don't worry about punctuation
No.
or spelling or grammar. You
No.
just
I mean, I
push
do.
through.
Yeah, when I'm at the keyboard and I'm writing away, I mean, I am maybe, oops, rephrase that wrong, but if I've got a particular scene out, I don't go back and try to
Tweak it.
change it or tweak it then. I
Right.
always think of that first draft as just getting all of my,
Discipline
yeah,
because your brain is like wanting it Yeah, it would be hard for me because it's like maybe it's don't be a perfectionist, right?
Yeah.
Just get that
Yeah.
wonderful um
Yeah.
get that whole like creation, that idea, get it down, and then go back and put makeup on it or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah. I always call it arting it up. The
Right.
second or third pass through, the first draft is getting it all out for me, and this is talking about long work, but I think it works even for a poet and
It's
a
good
poem.
for post. I mean,
Yeah,
I do that with my
yeah.
posts.
Yeah, exactly. The second draft, I make things really messy because I find every little window of opportunity or place where I suggest something and I write more on it. And
Okay.
then it gets way too big.
Right.
And then the third draft is figuring out what each segment has, what's its important thing to say or show, and then making it artful.
Wow. So
Kind of,
you do like 3 or 4 revisions?
yeah, yeah,
Very good.
yeah,
That's probably why it takes so long.
exactly. I
Because you
mean,
really, I've heard that, I try to do that as well, but I'm not, I guess if I were to say if there was any area, I'm brand new, so that's definitely an area. I just want to, get her done.
yeah.
But you,
Well, and I think there's a little bit of a difference with nonfiction and fiction there too.
mm-hmm,
Um, you know, um, in nonfiction, when the research that's in your mind is kind of helping you edit your work as you write, it makes more sense, to kind of hone in on something before you forget it or let
mm-hmm,
it go. With fiction, you're creating characters in a
mm-hmm.
world. So my fear is if I start to edit that too soon, I'm going to change something that world or those
Oh,
characters would bring to me that I don't yet have.
awesome. What a good perspective. That
Yeah.
that really brings that idea home,
Yeah.
is that you're creating worlds and you're creating people and genres,
Mhm.
and if you lock it down early, you're really stunting its growth
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah.
Interesting. So let's look forward. What excites you about this new season, personally, professionally, or creatively?
Well, of course, being retired now,
Mhm.
time,
Yeah.
time and how I'll manage it. But that just reminded me of when you were talking about the story of your grandmother.
Oh, right.
Um, there's a novel that's got me really excited that
Oh,
I
that.
just am beginning to work on, and it has to do with that time period. And it made
Ooh.
me think of that. And for some reason in my life, I tend to meet people who will say something that connects us in ways that I never knew. So you said that, and
Mhm.
I got chills thinking about
Yeah,
that.
what's up?
So I have this character that I literally had to kick out of a third novel. That right now, that third novel, I've written it all. It's kind of in a drawer. I'm leaving it alone so I can come back to it. My fourth novel is the one where I realized this character would not fit in that other novel, but I kind of fell in love with her and her
Mhm.
life story. So I started to realize she's her own kind of world and needs her own. But it was something different than I usually do. I usually do fiction that is contemporary
Mm.
and based on something going on in the world.
Hmm.
This will be historical fiction.
Wow.
So I write about environmental issues a lot. I write about how I feel about what I call the kind of our extractive culture and economy, where we, especially in the natural world, that we think of, say, a field as empty unless we do something with it.
Mm.
And in the oil and gas industry, that's extraction. Yes, cheap oil and gas has made life really easy and nice for a lot of us, and I don't deny that at all. But our oil and gas processes, things like fracking or tar sands, are getting more and more destructive in their
Hmm.
extractive processes. But anyway, this
Hmm.
character
Hmm.
um, is somebody who would be living kind of at the beginning of that time. And that book
Oh,
is going to be based in Michigan's Upper Peninsula.
okay.
During that time period that you speak of, the late 1800s to
Yes.
early 1900s, when logging, mining, and railroads had all come together in the UP and were really changing that landscape forever.
Hmm.
And one of the central tensions in the novel occurs when these two women who become incredible friends. They have really tough lives, but they depend on each other very much and they love each other deeply. They're separated because one of them is the wife of a logger who's then moving on.
Right.
They've cut over the land in the UP. There's logs, timber is just pretty much stripped and gone, and now they're moving to the Pacific Northwest.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
So when
That
you said
exactly
that
happened
about
to my
that, yeah,
grandmother.
yeah. So
Wow.
your grandmother
Yes.
has a story arc that is very much
Very
like,
similar.
yeah,
Oh,
my
that's
main character.
wow. So
So,
they ended up going, just so you know, the end of that little segue, they made it out to Vancouver, and it was her husband's parents. So there four of them went. Her husband, Joe, and they were actually from Manistee too,
oh wow,
before they came to
there
Cadillac.
you go.
I know, isn't that funny?
Yeah.
But so her in-laws and her husband, they all went out there, and they were the cooks and one was he had another kind of job, not a logger, but they were like support staff for
Yeah.
the logging camps. And so they went out to Vancouver Island to do that. And her father-in-law went up on the roof to fix the chimney or do something up there, and he fell off and broke both of his legs.
Oh my gosh.
And so they ended up just packing it in and coming back to Cadillac.
Did they really?
Yeah, so they ended up, coming in and just, working in Cadillac and my her husband, my grandfather, became a police officer
Oh
and,
wow.
did things in Cadillac.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
so but that's interesting.
That is so interesting because like I said, historical fiction going back is new for me. I love research though, so
Mm,
I'm loving the research that I'm
mhm.
doing. And part of it is, and one of the characters in my novel is that camp cook,
Oh
that
man.
that camp wagon that followed the loggers into
Wow.
the woods.
It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
So
that was awesome. Well,
more
before
ties.
yeah, more ties, and was wanting to make sure, Marianne, before we shut down the show, is there anything you'd like to share with the audience, or before we close our show?
No, not really, other than to say, if you are driven to create something, regardless of who the audience will be, create what you need to create. There's such a emphasis on publishing, which is important. Eventually, we want to get our words and our ideas out in the world. But sometimes I think, especially technology, has blended with the world of publishing and being an author, where there's a lot of pressure to promote and to constantly be on social media and to constantly be reaching online. But, to me, concentrating on the story that you need to tell has to come first, last, and always. And don't forget about the real sharing that occurs when you're face to face with somebody and you meet people and you get a chance to talk about these very universal things that we just discovered.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good perspective.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Marianne. And I'm sure that really hit home for a lot of our audience, and it definitely hit home for me. And so I'm going to ask one last question. Will you join me again in 12 to 18 months?
Oh, sure. I'd
Okay, we'll
love
see
to.
how the
Well,
book turned
plus
out.
then I want to get a chance to talk about the Lioness book too.
Okay, we'll do
Yeah.
that. Absolutely. Well, thanks a lot, and goodbye, everybody.
Thank you.